Good evening. It's good to see each one of you here tonight. Thank you so much for being a part of this first session of our seminar. And we are delighted to have Brother Jeff Miller with us on the topic, Christians Can Be Confident About Creation. We appreciate him coming. We appreciate everyone who's come out on this Friday night to enjoy this evening together, but especially to be informed about this important topic. And we're looking forward to an information-packed weekend that will be faith-building. We're going to begin with a prayer tonight, and then I'll introduce Jeff a little more, and we'll have one song, and then we'll turn him loose. So, Larry, would you come lead us in a prayer?
Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you now, thanking you for this day and for this time that we have to come together to assemble with saints that we can learn tonight from the things that Jeff has prepared. May we be able to learn from these things that he will present to us, that we can increase our faith and that we can draw closer to you. We're so thankful for the work that he does through Apologetics Press, and we pray that you'll continue to bless him in the work that he does. We're thankful for the congregation here at Walnut Grove. We pray that you'll continue to bless us, bless those that are visiting with us from area congregations. We pray that you will continue to be with them and bless them in the work that they're doing in their area. We're so thankful for all the many blessings that you give us. We're most thankful for the spiritual blessings that we enjoy in this life through being part of the church. We pray that we're thankful for Christ and the sacrifice he made, that through him we have hope. And we pray that you will forgive us of our sins as we repent and turn from them. We ask for all these things in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It's one thing to claim that that is true. People make a lot of claims about what they believe. But can we know that that's true? We've brought Jeff Miller here this weekend to help us in many ways. And Jeff's going to make a claim that Christians can be confident about creation. But he's going to do more than make a claim. He's going to give us the proof. And Jeff has prepared himself thoroughly to be able to offer this kind of evidence in support of the grandest claim that is the foundation for everything else we believe. God created the heavens and the earth. Jeff prepared himself by an undergraduate degree at Freed-Hardeman University in physical sciences and went on to graduate school at the University of Texas at Arlington and received bachelor and master's degree in mechanical engineering, and finally then achieved the PhD in mechanical engineering from Auburn University. He's very prepared, and he is driven with a love for truth and for people like us to be confident about creation. We're thankful that he has come to share with us in these matters. Brother Jeff Krantz is going to lead us in one song, and then we'll look forward to Brother Miller's presentation.
I'll just stand down here. Best song we can sing at this time, Our God, He is Alive, number 523. 523.
There is beyond the azure blue, our God has still from human sight. The day has cast
perfect song for the topic that we're going to have in our first session tonight. Appreciate you being here. There's a lot of things you could be doing on a Friday night, I know, besides being here, and appreciate your being able to be here. I seen Kobe back there. Where's Aaron at? Any Aaron? There. Is Aaron up there? No. Where's Aaron? We're going to have to get on to Aaron, Corey. Anyway, thank you for being here. Appreciate y'all having me out. I feel like I already know this congregation just because of knowing Jason, knowing the Lovitts, and love them dearly. Let's dig in on what we're going to cover tonight. We spend a lot of time in the church and at Apologetics Press, where I work, countering evolution. And we have to do that because the statistics show that that concept, that teaching, is eroding faith in the Bible in a widespread way. In and out of the church. There's a mass exodus going on from the church over this issue. Statistically, we're finding that 4 out of 10 of our kids are leaving the church when they leave home, and half of those are becoming irreligious in large part due to evolution and the teachings going on like that in the school system. And so we as Christians take time to counter evolutionary theory. But what about our model? Evolutionists turn around and point the finger at us and say, hey, you guys are spending all this time trying to poke holes in our model. Where's your model? I mean, we at least have a model. That's better than what you guys have. We at least have a way to do science where we can learn about the world around us and do science in that way. What can you guys do as creationists? You can't even claim to be scientific without a legitimate model. Notice, for example, what famous skeptic Michael Shermer said. He wrote a book where he tried to make a case against intelligent design and creation and make the case for evolution. Very influential writer, Kyle Budd at Apologetics Press, debated him this last fall. Here's one of the things that he said in his book. For creationists to disprove evolution, they need to unravel all these independent lines of evidence that he talks about in his book, as well as construct a rival theory that can explain them, the evidences, better than the theory of evolution. They have yet to do so, he said. Intelligent design creationists have no science to speak of. If creationists want their doctrines taught in public school science classes, they need first to develop a science, and then to convince scientists that their scientific ideas merit inclusion based on the quality of the arguments and the evidence. Famous philosopher from the 1800s, Herbert Spencer, said this: those who cavalierly reject the theory of evolution as not adequately supported by facts seem quite to forget that their own theory is supported by no facts at all, talking about creation. So, whenever you hear only one side of the story, it's easy to believe that side, isn't it? Proverbs 18:17 weighs in on that idea. But it's amazing how often you can change your position once you actually hear the other side of the story. Notice again, though, the second half of Shermer's challenge here. We need a rival theory, a rival perspective on the world around us that can explain the evidence better than naturalism and evolution. And according to him, creationists haven't done that. And so this is a major argument that they're using today, and they're being able to use it influentially with young people and trying to convince them that creation is not a scientific idea. So notice that defeating error is important. You have to defeat error. But that doesn't at the same time teach the truth. What that does is leave an empty vacuum that has to be filled with the truth. So how do we know that we're right, what we believe to be true? So does the evidence actually support what the biblical creation model would say, or do we have a blind faith like these guys say that we do? How do we know we're right? Do we have a model that can be used as a framework for scientific study to understand the world around us? So in this heavily scientific age in which we live, this is important concepts that we need to make sure that we're ready to give answers to, especially to young people. The law of rationality in philosophy says one should only draw those conclusions that are warranted by the evidence. In other words, only come to believe something that you can prove with enough evidence. And this is a biblical concept. 1 Thessalonians 5:21, examine everything carefully, hold fast to that which is good, or test all things, hold fast what is good, New King James rendering. So evidence, this is important to God. And it should be important to us. God doesn't expect us to blindly believe that He exists, that the Bible really is His Word, that the things in the Bible actually happen. He expects us to examine the evidence and draw the appropriate conclusion from that evidence, to know the truth that'll set you free, John 8:32, not just blindly accept it. So biblical faith in God is not blind. It's not this leap into the dark, hoping that there's somebody out there to catch us. That would be the idea of fideism, according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary. This is reliance on faith, they mean blind faith, rather than reason in pursuit of religious truth. Okay, so notice that modern dictionaries put faith in contrast to reasoning, evidence, because that's what the bulk of the religious world has come to believe about the idea of faith. They think that faith is just believing something, even against common sense, regardless of the evidence. That's not what the Bible teaches on this. The idea of faith in the Bible just comes from the word that we use for belief or trust or faith. It's the same concept. Our faith that we have in anybody, our parents, our spouse, is based on evidence. A person has proven themselves to be trustworthy from the evidence. It's not a blind faith. And that's the kind of faith that God expects us to have in Him as well, to examine the enormity of evidence in support of His existence. Notice, for example, what Romans 1:20 says, "Since the creation of the world, God's invisible attributes are clearly seen." They're not blindly accepted, being understood by doing science. The things that are made, studying the creation, even His eternal power and Godhead. You can come to know not only that God exists, but know some things about God. And if a person fails to come to certain conclusions about God, that person is without excuse. In other words, he's not going to be able to stand on Judgment Day and say to God, "This is your fault, okay? You didn't give me enough proof." You're not going to be able to do that. He's already given us substantial amount of evidence to come to know that He exists. And if we want to win the heart and minds of people in this heavily scientific age, then we have to be able to fill the void that we leave when we counter error. Fill that void with the truth. A scientific model, for example, in this case, that would harmonize with the evidence. Fill that void with the true model of our origins. Notice, before other models fill in the gap, because there's other models out there that are creation-oriented. That doesn't mean they're the true model. So we refute error and we have to teach the truth, and that is the goal of the seminar this weekend. We want to systematically make the case for biblical creation. So if you're going to do that, if you're going to systematically make this case based on the evidence rather than blind faith, then the first thing you have to do is show that the evidence supports the idea that a supernatural being exists. Okay? And then you have to show specifically which supernatural being you're talking about. Does the evidence actually show that it's the God of the Bible as opposed to Allah or Buddha or somebody else? And then show that the Bible really is His Word, that it actually is inspired, that it wasn't just written by other people claiming that it was inspired. And then, if we can determine that the Bible really is His Word, then we can go to the Bible to see what it actually says about the history of the universe. Especially anything that it says that happened would be very relevant in us understanding the world around us. Okay, and so then he has to show that that model is valid. In other words, that it is backed by the actual evidence. We can even go out and say, because we know that this happened, if I go and do this, then this will happen. Or if I go look here, that I'll find this. So we can make scientific predictions that then are verified upon examining the evidence. And then we have to show that this model is robust. And what we mean by that is we can defend it. It can withstand scrutiny by people, critics that come and try to attack it. So this is what we're going to be doing this weekend. So first of all, concerning our first plank, can we logically come to the conclusion that there has to be a being outside of the realms of nature, supernatural? And I'm sure you've seen a lot of evidence over the years that supports that idea. So let's just do a summary of this idea, kind of a survey of this topic of how you can know a God exists. So in studying the created order over the millennia, humans have reasoned through logically from the available evidence, our ability to think and reason, and articulated many excellent philosophical arguments that point to the logical conclusion that there has to be a supernatural being. And these arguments have been around a long time. And even though the atheists have tried to chip away at these arguments, they continue to stand today as testaments to God's existence. They haven't been refuted. For example, notice what Blair Scott of American Atheists said in his debate with Kyle Butt several years ago. The theological arguments have not changed much over thousands of years. And he was scoffing when he said this, as though that somehow was an argument against biblical creation. But that's actually a compliment, because truth shouldn't need to change. The arguments, even though they were articulated long ago, they have stood the test of time, no matter what kind of chiseling people have tried to do against these arguments. And in fact, interestingly, Fred Hoyle, this is the guy that actually coined the term Big Bang Theory. He said you should be suspicious of a theory if more and more hypotheses are needed to support it. In other words, if you've got a theory and you keep finding from the evidence that it doesn't fit the theory, and so you have to keep piling, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's this, maybe, and you pile on more and more hypotheses to try to keep the theory alive, you should be suspicious of a theory like that. And ironically, that is exactly what has to happen with Darwinian evolution and the Big Bang Theory. They're constantly having to be revised and even overhauled in order to stay in line with the latest evidence that's coming out. Like, for example, this James Webb Telescope evidence that's come out in the last year or so that doesn't fit the standard models of the Big Bang Theory. They have to totally overhaul it yet again. But the classical arguments for the existence of God haven't had to change. They just continue to pile up more and more evidence that substantiates them as we learn more and more about the order around us. For example, what we might call the moral argument. This is the idea that humans intuitively know there is right and there is wrong, and it's not open to your opinion. In other words, it is what we call objective moral value. It's not based on your opinion and my opinion. It is above us. Right and wrong that we all understand is right and wrong, no matter who it is, and it doesn't matter where they live and even when they live. So an objective system of morality, though, that is above humanity could not have been written by humans. And so by implication, there would have to be a moral being above humanity that created morality. And that is the idea of the moral argument. See, if atheism is true, then there really is no such thing as right and wrong. There's just subjective truth, just your opinion. So notice what Richard Dawkins said in The God Delusion. Absolutist moral discrimination, in other words, objective moral value, is devastatingly undermined by the fact of evolution. In other words, if evolution is true, if it's a fact, then there is no absolute moral discrimination. There's no objective truth. There's just your opinion, his opinion, my opinion. William Provine, in 1998, he's a professor of biology at Cornell, evolutionary biology at Cornell, and he laid out several undeniable implications of atheism in a speech that he did. Notice number 3. According to the naturalistic evolutionary model, no ultimate foundation for ethics exists. And notice also, he said that Charles Darwin understood that. He understood that perfectly when he was developing evolutionary theory. Notice what Darwin said in his autobiography. A man who has no assured and ever-present belief in the existence of a personal God or of a future existence with retribution and reward can have for his rule of life, as far as I can see, only to follow those impulses and instincts which are the strongest or which seem to him the best ones. So according to Darwin, pure naturalist, atheism, would mean that there is no set moral standard. There's just what everybody else feels like whatever pushes them to behave a certain way. There is no objective moral value. Jean-Paul Sartre, existentialist philosopher, said, everything is indeed permitted if God does not exist, right? No God, no higher being that gave absolute morality that everyone is subject to. So then there would just be opinions, and there may be people stronger that can enforce their opinions on everybody else, but that doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. It's ultimately just their opinion. Now we know intuitively, though, that doesn't seem right. We can state some specifically heinous things that have happened in history, and we all know that's just terrible. You know, we all know this is just wrong, and nobody would say that it's not. So atheists have trouble sticking to the idea that there's no such thing as morality that is above us that everybody should be doing, that everybody should be beholden to this system of morality. Dan Barker, pretty notorious atheist and debater, wrote the book Godless, in which Richard Dawkins wrote the foreword. And he's at the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And Kyle Butt debated him back in 2009. And during the Q&A portion, Kyle asked him if it would be acceptable morally to rape a girl if it was going to save the entire human race from an alien race that was going to come down and kill everybody. So watch what Barker has to say, stumbling over himself, to try to be consistent with his position when you have real evil like that. It'd be horrible. It'd be regrettable. I would hate myself. And I'd say, why? Why would you? Why would that bother you? I'd probably kill myself after doing it, but I would have the courage, if that was the only option. If that were the only option, then I would go through with it. I'd pity that woman. I'd pity myself. But notice, morality would require me to take the course of action that results in the least amount of harm. And those of you whose lives that I save by doing that, you might be disgusted at what I did, but you'd be alive rather than dead. So in that weird situation, which is hypothetical and extreme, would never happen, there are cases where what we think are right and wrong could be flipped around. And notice, though, he's acknowledging that there is right and wrong. Okay? Kyle proceeded to ask him, okay, well, would you rape 2 women? How about 2,000? Would it be okay to rape 2 million women to save the human race? And Barker said to save 6 billion, which was what it was at the time. Yes, it would be, because otherwise you've got 6 billion deaths. Are you telling me we should not do what is morally necessary to do to minimize harm? So notice, he thinks that there's moral necessities. Right? He has got a system of morality that he believes everybody should be beholden to. It's not just opinion. So he may disagree about what the objective truth is, but he believes in objective truth. He believes there's moral necessity. So, if you think about this, it really doesn't matter what culture or setting you grow up in. We even understand from a young age, before we've even been taught about morality, that there's right and wrong. We know, for example, we don't have to be told this. It would not be right, it would not be fair if another person came and took something from me that wasn't his, that I didn't give him in the first place. You don't even have to learn that. You just know it. You know that's not right, and it's going to anger you. We know, even if you're 3 years old and you steal a cookie, and your brother steals a cookie, and you get into trouble and he doesn't, nobody has to tell you that's not right. You would say, that's not fair. That's not just. Okay, we all understand it's not fair. If we work our whole lives for something, someone comes and beats me up and takes it. We understand that. We understand if we do a bunch of work writing a paper and someone comes along and plagiarizes it, that's not right. We don't even have to know what plagiarism is. And we may accept these things and say, well, that's just the way of the world, move on. But the point is, we all know it would be unfair, it's wrong, and it's not opinion to say that. Injustice is objectively wrong. We understand that there's a higher law that governs everyone about what is fair, what is just, that is above humans and not subject to our opinions. There can't be this higher law code about justice and fairness without there being a lawmaker that wrote that law code. So objective morality illustrates there must be a God, and that is the moral argument. And concerning this fact that we intuitively understand fairness and justice, we seem to have a built-in program that tells us about this. It's interesting to note that in the Bible, the words that in English that we translate righteous or just are translated interchangeably from their underlying Greek and Hebrew words. In Hebrew, it's tzaddik, which can be translated as righteous or just. In Greek, it's dikaios, again, can be translated as righteous or just. And so the implication is that what is right ultimately comes down to what is just or fair. So the fact that we've been programmed with a fairness meter means that we have a program that can be used to help us determine right or wrong, even if nobody tells us that. Which means there is right and wrong that humans don't make up. It's programmed into us. It's not developed by us. So the minute a person admits that there are some things that are objectively unfair for anyone, then he's admitting to the existence of objective moral value and therefore a God that is above humanity. He's rejecting atheism when he does that. The intuitional argument. This is the idea that humans are incurably religious. Our intuition tells us that there is a God. Again, this seems to be built into us. It seems to be common sense to humanity. And according to, for example, adherents.com, some 92% of the world believes that there's something beyond the purely physical, and almost all of them are worshiping something. And animals, of course, don't do this, but humans seem to have this built-in program that tells us to believe there's something beyond humanity, something beyond nature that we are beholden to and should be worshiping. So notice, for example, what Michael Shermer admitted. We perceive nature to be intelligently designed. He came out and admitted that. Humanity perceives nature to be intelligently designed. Since the most common reason people give for why they believe in God is the good design of the world, intelligent design creationists are tapping into the intuitive understanding most people hold about life and the universe. This is intuitive to us. Richard Dawkins says it's almost as if the human brain were specifically designed to find Darwinism hard to believe. You know, it's like he's ripping his hair out over this. How frustrating this is. He's trying to get everybody to believe in evolution, but humans intuitively know this is silly. There's got to be an intelligent designer. Notice what he says. Why, if it is false, does every culture in the world have religion? True or false, religion is ubiquitous, so where does it come from? Right? So the atheists are pulling their hair out trying to figure out why you would have this intuitive tendency to want to be religious and worship something. In fact, notice what psychologists Paul Bloom and Dina Weisberg of Yale and University of Pennsylvania acknowledged. There's by now a large body of research suggesting that humans are natural-born creationists. When we see non-random structure and design, we assume that it was created by an intelligent being because that's logical, that's rational, right? You have to be untaught that by false teachers. We're born intuitively knowing, of course, there's a God, and it's silly to think there wouldn't be. Geneticist Dean Hamer even wrote a book called The God Gene, where he acknowledged that humans seem to be hardwired to be religious, and he's trying to figure out how do we explain this from an evolutionary perspective. And so he said maybe there's genes, like physical genes that are passed on in your DNA that somehow tell you to be religious, even though there's never been such a thing found. So this religious inclination of humanity is an acknowledged problem for atheists. Why? Why would this be a problem? Well, notice what Dawkins said. Religion is so wasteful, so extravagant, and Darwinian selection habitually targets and eliminates waste. So why wouldn't it eliminate this? Why would the entire human population be religious? This goes totally against evolution. Famous atheistic philosopher Daniel Dennett expounds on the problem of this costly religion idea. The world is populated by billions of people, he says, almost all of whom devote a significant fraction of their time and energy to some sort of religious activity. Rituals such as daily prayer, both public and private, or frequent attendance at ceremonies, but also costly sacrifices, not working on certain days, no matter what looming crisis needs prompt attention, and abiding by a host of strenuously observed prohibitions and requirements. So if evolution were true, then why wasn't religion eliminated? Humans engage in this costly endeavor that should have worked against us from an evolutionary perspective, and yet it's ultimately led to our being the ultimate animal on the planet, the chief animal. This doesn't fit. You got a problem here. This is the intuitional argument. So evolutionists are going to great lengths to try to explain why humans would be religious. Dawkins has proposed, without any evidence, that maybe religion is like a virus that has infected humanity and is being passed down as we evangelize. That's kind of like our means of spreading the virus or something. And he says that genetically we do this through what are called memes that he made up, with the idea being that theism, again, is like a virus of the mind that is trying to replicate itself for survival. You know, okay, it's fun to just speculate, but of course, this is a double-edged sword. Why wouldn't we then say, I think atheism really could be a meme? I mean, it has the same kind of things that they're saying theism would have, and the bottom line is there's no evidence for this. This is a major problem for the evolutionary model. Humanity seems to have been built to be religious, and it makes no sense from an evolutionary perspective. Our natural inclination to believe there's something beyond us that we're beholden to and should be worshiping is evidence that such a being exists, and put that instinct in us. And I think that's what's being alluded to maybe here in Acts 17. God has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth. All right, so He made them in a way that they would seek the Lord in the hope that they might grope for Him and find Him. And all the while, He's not far from each one of us, for in Him we live and move and have our being. This idea, He put within us this tendency to believe that He exists and want to search for Him. And then He made sure that He's not far from us. The evidence is right there. We just have to dig a little bit to find it. Human intuition indicates God exists. Then you have the aesthetic argument, the idea that beauty exists, and we have been given the capability of appreciating this. And again, atheism can't adequately explain beauty, because that appreciation for beauty, by and large, has no evolutionary advantage, okay? Which highlights the fact that we have a benevolent God that exists, cares for His creation, and wants to give us joy and pleasure. So now Darwin recognized this is a threat to evolution. Notice what he said in The Origin of Species. Some authors believe that many structures have been created for the sake of beauty, to delight man or the Creator, or for the sake of mere variety. Such doctrines, if true, would be absolutely fatal to my theory. Why? Well, because evolution can't explain how something would become beautiful for the sole benefit of others. Because evolution is survival of the fittest. It's the selfish battle of the strong for survival. It's not about other people. So evolving a trait has to have some kind of selfish benefit, not the benefit of other people, to give them pleasure. So what he hypothesized was, beauty wasn't created. It evolved. How did that happen? Well, he didn't know. He didn't have an explanation for that. But it evolves accidentally, and then it's stuck around in certain creatures like the beautiful male birds, because that beauty benefited those creatures personally in getting mates, right? What's called sexual selection. And then the ugly animals, they wouldn't tend to get those mates, and so they would die out, and so then you have more beauty. All right, now, if you see any problem here, you ever seen any ugly creatures out there? And they've somehow stuck around? But also notice Darwin's concept was natural selection. But natural selection doesn't explain how you get the new creature. It's survival of the fittest. You already have to have the creatures there, and then whichever ones are the fittest survive. So it explains the survival of the fittest, not the arrival of the fittest. Evolution has no answer for how those creatures could have evolved that beauty, for example, in the first place. So the accidental evolution of beauty that was then appealing to mates. There's no known evolutionary mechanism to generate new information in the genome in a natural way. There's no known mechanism to do that. Mutations, when we go actually look at the evidence, mutations don't do that. But new information would be needed to create beauty where there once was no beauty, and there is no way to explain that from an evolutionary perspective. But also, number two, notice that natural selection doesn't explain why you have this appreciation of beauty in the first place. That's the important concept here. Why do you get joy and pleasure and happiness from things that would have nothing to do with helping you, and sometimes they actually harm you? Okay, but you can get joy and pleasure from listening to beautiful music, or from seeing a waterfall or a sunset, even looking into the sun, which will hurt you, and yet it will still provide beauty that you appreciate. Why do we have an appreciation of beauty? And therein lies the argument for the existence of a loving God that put that in us, that program. He's made everything beautiful in its time, Ecclesiastes 3:11, things that are pleasant for the eyes, Ecclesiastes 11:7. The ontological argument is a complicated argument to understand, very philosophical, and there's variations on this argument. And so we'll just look at this very briefly, but the general idea is that you can't conceive of a quality or a characteristic that doesn't exist in some being out there. So for example, if you were to make up something that you've never seen, okay, and you just make it up in your mind, it is still composed of things you know exist. Okay, so try to do this. Make up a creature, a four-headed dragon's got snakes for legs and fire's coming out of its eye sockets, whatever you come up with, the creature is composed of things that you know exist. Heads, snakes, fire, eyes. You can't really come up with anything totally new that's not comprised of characteristics that you don't know exist. You think of the Star Trek characters and Star Wars, it's all made up of characteristics you know exist that have just been jumbled together in different ways. So the ontological argument says you can't conceive of characteristics that don't exist in some being, and yet you can conceive of superlative characteristics like omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence, omnibenevolence, and so forth, indicating that these must exist in some being. Okay, and so we could go much deeper into this, and many have, in explaining this concept, but that is basically the ontological argument. Then there's one of my favorites, the cosmological argument. So the cosmos, so the universe, it exists, and it demands an ultimate cause for it. Okay, the universe is an effect, it demands a cause. Remember in Job 38, God lays out the basic thrust of this argument when he asked Job, hey, do you know about the creation of the earth? Where did it come from? Who created it? Who laid the foundation of the earth? Who determined its measurements? Who stretched the line upon it? Why would he ask these things? Well, he's highlighting the fact that they demand an ultimate cause. Who laid its cornerstone? The universe exists, it demands a cause. Well, so if there has to be a reason, a cause for the universe, this idea of cause and effect is fundamental to what science is all about. This is what science does. You're trying to determine the effects of various causes and the causes of various effects. So of all things that would be scientific, it would be this law. Now, so if we want to be scientific and we want to be rational and follow the evidence, then the evidence says that the law of cause and effect, the law of causality, applies everywhere in the universe, everywhere we've ever seen it. It totally governs the entire universe. In paraphrasing, it basically says anytime you have an effect, there must logically be a cause. More precisely, every material effect, in other words, everything we've been able to witness in the material realm, must have an adequate antecedent or simultaneous cause. So the cause either has to come before the effect or it can come at the same time as the effect, and it has to be adequate, meaning it has to have enough power to bring about whatever the effect is. So all natural effects must have causes. So you look at the universe and you see, wow, we've got a lot of effects here. The planets exist. They're moving through space, they're spinning. These are effects, and even the naturalistic community acknowledges there has to be a reason, an ultimate cause to explain these, and they can't come up with one. The Big Bang hasn't been able to do it. They're not being able to answer the questions with this. Life exists, that's an effect. They know it's an effect. It had to somehow, from their perspective, come from non-life, even though there is no explanation for how that could happen. But they recognize there has to be a cause for life. Something has to be able to make these things happen, and the naturalist has no explanation. The mere existence of the cosmos is proof of the existence of the supernatural being that caused it. So how does the naturalist, the atheist, try to deal with this? What cause can they point to try to explain the existence of the universe without a God? All right, well, generally speaking today, they argue that the origin of the universe can be explained from this massive explosion-like event, from this extremely hot, tiny, dense ball of basically infinite mass billions of years ago, which inflated faster than the speed of light for a tiny period of time and continues to expand today. Now, even if that were true, of course, we ask, where did the little ball come from? What's the cause? So if you're a naturalist, you've only got two options. Either it created itself, that more sophisticated terminology that says it's spontaneously generated. In other words, it just all of a sudden popped into existence. Or it is self-existent. So it's always existed, it's eternal. So let's look at the first option. Could the matter and stuff of the universe have just popped into existence when we look at the actual evidence? All right, well, let's say that there's an invisible box around the entire universe. Okay, it's a pretty big box, and this is what we call a boundary layer in thermodynamics, and this is huge. It's big enough for the whole universe to be inside of this box. So if you believed in the Big Bang, this would be like the blast radius of the Big Bang. So it's why it's bigger than how far the universe has expanded so far. So if you believe that the universe could just spontaneously generate and pop into existence on its own, then in a thermodynamic sense, you believe this box was initially completely empty. So let's zoom inside of the box. We're inside of the box, and the spontaneous generation model says nobody put the stuff in there. It put itself there. And so according to this model, you can just stand around inside of this box and stare into nothingness, and given enough time, all of a sudden, voila, something will just appear. And not only could something pop into existence, but according to this version of the model, which, by the way, is the dominant belief system today, a little ball containing all of the energy of the entire universe pops into existence, and then so they say the Big Bang process starts, and eventually you have stars and galaxies coming into existence. The universe expands, life springs into existence, gradually evolves over time, and then ultimately you show up in the universe. This is the dominant belief system today. I basically call it a modern form of a respectable form of witchcraft without a witch. Okay, it's just magic. There's no explanation for any of this. Somehow things just pop into existence. And you really don't even have to have a wizard. It just does it on its own. And yet this is looked at as respectable today. Now you got some major problems with this when you look at the actual evidence. The first law of thermodynamics, this law is sometimes called a super law. This is a law that other laws are based on, okay? If there's anything that would be scientific, it'd be these laws of thermodynamics. And notice what the first law says. Based on everything we've ever seen in nature, energy can be neither created nor destroyed, but can only be converted from one form to another. And we also call this the law of conservation of matter and energy. What that means, practically speaking, have you ever thought about what happened to a log of wood when you burned it? Where did it all go? So you're left with this pile of ash. That doesn't account for all the stuff, so where did it go? Where did the rest of it go? Has it disappeared from the universe? Was it destroyed? Well, the first law of thermodynamics says that any process we've ever witnessed, wood burning, whatever it is, matter and energy can change into other forms while it's going through the process, like in the case of burning, heat, light, ash. But the sum total amount of energy that was in the universe before you burn the wood is the same as you have after you burn the wood. So energy hasn't disappeared or been destroyed by burning the wood, and energy hasn't popped into existence in the process. So using more technical terminology, the first law says that in any kind of a system, including a closed system, but specifically in a closed system, like our box that contains the universe, where there's no energy coming into that system or leaving the system from outside of the box. So no one's opening the box and putting stuff in there or taking it out. The sum total amount of energy within the boundaries of that system must remain constant. So as this chart shows, the amount of energy present before any process we've ever seen, the amount of energy before any process must be the same as the amount of energy after the process. So guess what? If you start with nothing before a process, guess what you have after the process? Nothing. Okay, this isn't rocket science, right? And yet this is a fundamental law that has no exceptions to it by definition. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a law anymore. It can't have exceptions. So by implication, it would be unscientific. It would go against the most fundamental law of science to believe that matter and energy could come into being in such a way that the first law of thermodynamics was violated. So according to the first law of thermodynamics, the only way matter and energy can appear in that box is if it's caused to appear there by something outside of the box. That's what the evidence from science tells us. So, according to the scientific evidence, the first option is not possible. Now, you can go ahead and believe that if you want. You just need to understand it's not based on the actual evidence. You have a blind faith if you believe that. That's the key here. You believe in something that is not natural. It doesn't happen in nature. So guess what? You're a supernaturalist just like me if you believe that. Now the question is just which supernatural realm exists, right? But ultimately, you cannot believe matter and energy can pop into existence and still be a naturalist. That doesn't happen in nature. What about the second option? Could matter have an energy have always existed? This is not even accepted by most today. This was more a dominant belief a few decades ago, and it's fallen on hard times because of the implications of the second law of thermodynamics. So this model would claim the universe has always existed inside of this box. No one had to put it there because it's always been there, moving through space forever, expanding, or if you believe in the oscillating universe model, you believe the universe operates in a cycle where you have a collapse and then a big bang and then an expansion and then another collapse, another big bang, expansion, like a big universal accordion forever. So this model would say that the universe is eternal. The stuff of the universe has always been here. Well, notice what Paul Davies, who's an atheist, physicist, cosmologist, astrobiologist at Arizona State University, writing in New Scientist, he said, the celebrated second law of thermodynamics says, roughly speaking, that in any change, the universe becomes a slightly more disorderly place. The entropy goes up, the information content goes down. This natural tendency towards disintegration and chaos is evident all around us. So what are the implications of that? Well, the second law of thermodynamics builds on the first, and it says even though you have the same amount of energy present before and after a process, some of the energy in the process is transformed into a less usable form, and you call this entropy. And this is an irreversible process. It only goes in one direction in our universe, which is another thing that makes them pull their hair out. Why is it doing this? Why is there this rule? Why does this law exist and it's forcing everything to behave only this way? So any kind of process we've ever seen, entropy just keeps going up. Now what this means, practically speaking, is everything is wearing out. It's decaying. The universe is running down because we're running out of usable energy. And like Davies said, we can see this everywhere. Wouldn't it be nice if you could go to a junkyard and get a clunker and just sit there and watch it? And eventually it'll turn into a nice sports car that's just flawless. Wouldn't that be nice? It's not going to happen. We all know it's going to do the opposite. It's going to keep decaying. Parents, wouldn't you love it if your kids' rooms tended towards order instead of disorder, right? That's not going to happen. Wouldn't it be nice if your house didn't have to be constantly worked on and repainted and so forth? I thought it'd be really neat to get a t-shirt that said, like a superhero, and it says entropy fighter. Because really that's what we're all doing. I mean, so much, we're just constantly in the job as humans, fighting entropy, whether it be physical or spiritual entropy. It's so much of what the job of a human involves. So returning to our wood burning example, when wood burns, all of the energy that was present before it burned is still present after it burned, according to the first law. But according to the second law of thermodynamics, much of it transforms into less usable forms like heat, and once that heat dissipates, you can't retrieve it. You're essentially left with this pile of ash, which isn't nearly as usable. And just like with the first law, the second law has no exceptions. It's never been broken. To date, no experiment has been conducted that contradicts the second law, and this should be taken as sufficient proof of its validity if you're being logical, if you're being rational and sticking with the actual evidence. Now, what does this mean concerning the origins question? Well, what it means is the universe couldn't have always existed and you still have usable energy. So according to the second law, if the universe is infinite in age, then everything should be totally broken down to a state of heat death. All right? And we should have no more usable energy left. And yet we have an abundant amount of usable energy in harmony with the creation model, which says the universe is relatively young. So notice, by the way, and I cover so much of this in my Science First Evolution book, way more in depth, but the biblical model is totally in harmony with these laws. So the creation model predicts decay and a gradual loss of usable energy. Notice, for example, what Hebrews 1 says, quoting from Psalm 102, written like 3,000 years ago. You, Lord, at the beginning laid the foundation of the earth, the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you remain. Notice, they will all grow old like a garment. Like a cloak, you'll fold them up and they will be changed, but you are the same and your years will not fail. There's the second law of thermodynamics written like 3,000 years ago, even though we only started articulating this in the last 150 years or so. So according to the actual scientific evidence, The spontaneous generation of matter and energy could not have happened, and matter and energy can't be eternal. Those are the only two options if you're going to be a naturalist. So according to the evidence, the idea, atheism can't be true. I mean, you can continue to believe that, but again, you're being irrational if you do that. You have a blind faith in atheism. So by process of elimination, some form of creation has to be true. And on top of that, the biblical creation model is actually supported by both the first and second laws of thermodynamics. They're both alluded to in the Bible. So if you stick with the scientific evidence, rather than blindly accepting what naturalists are shoving down the throat of our young people, the evidence actually points to God, undeniably. And this is the cosmological argument. The universe is here. It couldn't create itself. It requires a being outside of the universe to have created it. One other argument, as we wrap this session up, the teleological argument is a special interest to engineers. Atheistic philosopher and professor Paul Ricci said, it's true that everything designed has a designer logically. And this summarizes the idea of the teleological argument. If we can find evidence of universal design, then by implication there's a universal designer. Now generally, atheists acknowledge that that would be true, usually. But the problem is they generally refuse to admit that there is design in the universe. But they at least admit, okay, if you could find design, then there would have to be a designer. You can't have a poem without there being a poet. Thank you. A painting requires a painter. This is hard, isn't it? A fingerprint requires a finger. Thank you, Jason. You'd be surprised I get some strange answers on that one. So does the universe have the characteristic of design reasonably? Really, there's an infinite number of examples that if you're just being unbiased about this, they clearly show things like, when you talk about design, what are we talking about? We're talking about things that show intention, purpose behind them, right? Reasons for them, which is something that demands the existence of a mind behind it. And there's so many examples of this. Notice what Shermer said about it. The design inference comes naturally. The reason people think that a designer created the world is because it looks designed. You seeing this? Like he can't even help it. We perceive nature to be intelligently designed based on evidence, experience of human artifacts. We know some human artifacts are intelligently designed because we've observed them being made and we have vast experience with human artificers. So notice he even acknowledges this really isn't just a blind faith. We logically come to the conclusion there has to be a designer. This isn't some blind faith silliness of an argument. Since the most common reason people give for why they believe in God is the good design of the world, intelligent design creationists are tapping into the intuitive understanding most people hold about life in the universe. It's intuitive. Well, let's look at just a couple examples here in the area of thermal design. This is an area that I studied in my master's level work, so this is interesting stuff, this temperature regulation that goes on in our body. And this is called the biothermal system in your body. You know, you've seen the muscular and skeletal and so forth. Well, you've got a biothermal system that is regulating your temperature and fluctuations going on in your body. And it's doing this through this, what we call the thermoregulatory system. Very complex, fascinating system in your body that is constantly at work helping your body deal with temperature, adjust to temperature within and without your body. And this entire system in your body, as you might expect, is controlled in your brain. And the processing center in the brain that controls the biothermal system we call the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is basically the thermostat for the body's air conditioning system. So it's controlling your system. And the body uses these temperature sensors like thermometers or thermocouples in engineering. These are called thermoreceptors. And these are located throughout your body in strategic places, and they're reading the temperature wherever they are. You've got them in the hypothalamus, they're in your skin, they're in your bladder, we even have them in the eyes. And the thermoreceptors that are in your skin are the peripheral nerves, and they're constantly detecting changes in external temperature, so air temperature. and the thermoreceptors in your hypothalamus are detecting your blood temperature. And so all this temperature information is constantly being handled by the hypothalamus. By the way, how did that happen? That's a lot of information that it's just somehow accidentally knowing what to do with. Okay? So all of this is going on in the hypothalamus, and it is able to then send out messages to adjust the body's functions using what are called effector nerves. These are like the power lines that are used to communicate with various parts of the body to initiate different kinds of temperature response. It's a very sophisticated system. I could do an entire session just on this. Well, let's just look at a couple small examples. So one fascinating part of your body's temperature system is the bladder's detrusor muscle. You may not have even known that you had one, but that there's thermoreceptors in your bladder that are taking the temperature of the liquid therein constantly. It sends all that information up to the hypothalamus using these effector nerves. And as the temperature of the bladder drops because it gets cold, then a bladder cooling reflex is triggered in the hypothalamus, and it sends a message down to the detrusor muscle on the bladder, urging it to contract. And that detrusor contraction makes you feel the urge to go get that cooler liquid out of your body, therefore keeping your temperature more regulated. Now again, step back and think here, logically. How in the world did that happen by accident? I mean, that's silliness. Just trying to follow the evidence here. That shows planning, forethought, intention. This had to already be planned out and working from the beginning. You think about it. How helpful would it be if you had an effector nerve that only went halfway to the bladder? Didn't quite get there. How helpful is that going to be? No, this had to already be intact working. This shows decisive design, planning, intention. When you look at this without bias, this is common sense. There's no way around it. The natural order and its complexity is simply stunning, and I'm not alone in acknowledging that. An area of engineering that is growing by leaps and bounds across the world is called biomimicry, as well as bio-inspired engineering, and this is where engineers use nature as a blueprint and try to copy it in design. The webpage for George Washington University Center for Biomimetics and Bio-Inspired Engineering says this: however, despite our seeming prowess in these component technologies, we find it hard to outperform nature in this arena. Nature's solutions are smarter, more energy efficient, agile, adaptable, fault-tolerant, environmentally friendly, and multifunctional. Thus, there is much that we as engineers can learn from nature as we develop the next generation machines and technologies. All of this just happened blindly by chance? This shows a major engineer, a super intellect behind the universe, where we even have the greatest engineering minds saying, look, we can't beat this. Let's just try to copy it. Like, we can't come up with something better. This is already too well designed. Engineers stand in awe of the awesome design in nature. So here's just one example. Engineers are amazed in coming to the realization that insects can function amazingly well, especially insects that can fly, when you consider the fact that they have less than 0.01% as many neurons in their brains as do humans. And yet their ability to maneuver, especially in the air, we can't do this in engineering. We can't equal this. And so one of the cool features that engineers discovered in the last several years is that some of these insects have this sophisticated engineering sensor on their head that helps them to keep track of their orientation, where they can stay upright while they're in the air. Ocelli are these small eyes located on the heads of various kinds of insects that are in addition to the larger eyes that you tend to notice, that are their compound eyes. So you don't tend to even notice these little tiny eyes. And engineers believe that these are horizon sensors that locate the horizon so that the insect is able to know which way is up and down while it's doing amazing feats of acrobatics in the air. So with these ocelli in mind, engineers started trying to mimic these in their design of aerial vehicles. Engineers from Caltech and Australian National University, in conjunction with NASA, designed a biomorphic ocellus, mimicking these ocelli that are found in dragonflies. And they've found that it helps to achieve a better flight stabilization system for aerial vehicles. So when engineers do this, even if they're unconsciously doing it, they're acknowledging the awesome design in the universe. It's not logical to say, well, somehow no brain designed something way better than all the brains combined could do. I mean, it's just not logical to say that. That requires a blind faith to say that that could happen. Well, there's many, many other powerful evidences of design we could look at, but we'll not do that for now. But I do want to tell you a little bit about our work at AP as we go along throughout the weekend here. Billions of people on the planet today, pushing, I guess, 8 billion, maybe have passed that by now. And notice the makeup of the various religions of the world. Almost 2 billion Muslims. That's quickly on the rise. Hinduism makes up over 1 billion. 1.2 irreligious. This includes atheists and irreligious and infidels and so forth. 1.2 billion. And then Christianity, 2.3 billion, half of which are Catholic, the other half Protestant. Hardly any of them, of course, believe in New Testament Christianity. And the question is, are we ready to defend the truth on a wide array of false ideas that are coming at us? So much of this is hitting us here in the United States, where we have this melting pot of ideas, crazy ideas from all over the world that comes together. And yet 1 Peter 3:15 says we're supposed to always be ready to give a defense to everyone. This is commanded. We're supposed to be apologists. Somebody contacted our office and said, you know, I appreciate what y'all are trying to do, but I don't appreciate the name of your organization because y'all don't have anything to apologize for. Right? Apologetics Press. And I know that's not what this is about. Apologetics comes from the Greek word for giving a defense, okay? Apologia, that's what the underlying Greek word is. So all Christians are supposed to be apologists. We're to be ready to preach the word in season and out of season, whether it's popular or not, whatever is going to be coming your way. Ezekiel 3:18 and 19 has this eerie warning. When I say to the wicked, you shall surely die, and you don't warn him, nor speak to warn the wicked from his wicked way to save his life. Okay, that same wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood I'll require at your hand. Yet if you warn the wicked and he doesn't turn from his wickedness, nor from his wicked way, he shall die in his iniquity, but you have delivered your soul. So we're expected to be ready to deal with the attacks being made on Christianity by atheists and all these other crazy ideas that are out there. We're supposed to be ready to do this, and yet we're all very busy. We've got a lot of things to do, and there's so many crazy ideas out there coming at us. And so it's helpful, I believe, I always believed it's helpful to have organizations like Apologetics Press, Christian Courier. I go to Christian Courier a lot. I tell Jason, and I send people there too. Organizations where you've got people that are being able to devote the time to do the research on questions that people are asking that a lot of times Christians don't have time to go dig in and do all the research on. And so we're doing this kind of research, packaging it for you in a way where you can learn these things for yourself, and more importantly, prepare you to be able to defend the truth as well, making sure that you get this material into the hands of people that need this, especially young people. We're a nonprofit organization. We're not in this to make money from this. We offer these materials so low in price that we ultimately rely on a huge amount of donations to do what we're doing. So I'll try to tell you a little bit more about what we're doing at AP over the weekend, and with the material I have available back there for purchase, so that you'll know what you're looking at there. All right. In our next session, we want to dig into the next layer, and actually the next two layers on our tower that we're building this weekend. How much time we got, Jason? What do we want to do here? Yeah.
See, it's 7:10. Let's have about a 15-minute break. We'll call everyone back about 7:25. And as Jeff just mentioned, there's some material in the hallway in the back, and there's a center section that is labeled free material. So in that section, there's some copies of Discovery Magazine for Kids, Reason and Revelation, a catalog. And so check that out for a few minutes, and we'll be back in here in about 15. Thank you.